Hey everyone, you're listening to the Alex Files. I'm Alex.
And I'm also Alex.
And yes, we're two friends who happen to share the same name, coming to you episode 3.
Woo!
We're doing it. We're gonna shift today away from still hard things, but talking about setting boundaries and why is it so hard? It's very timely right now. We've almost been in this global pandemic for a year, which is insane.
Surreal.
Pretty surreal. But just, basic boundary setting is a really important tool and skill to have, and it can be way easier said than done, but thought we could share some of our experiences with you all today. They might resonate with you, and, it's not always easy to have these conversations, and especially in the current state we're in, but just kind of wanted to dive into this topic today because I think we can all relate to it, especially now.
Yeah, and I think it's always important, and it's especially important right now to pace ourselves and make sure that we are setting boundaries and taking care of ourselves during this continuously traumatic experience of the pandemic.
So this is a very big and sort of loaded topic, but just from your own experience, what does boundary setting look like to you on sort of a basic level? How do you maybe practice this? I mean, I know there are many different ways to kind of think about this, like work, pandemic, with friends, with family, but how do you think about boundary setting?
Well, if you had asked this question to me 2 years ago, I would say I don't really have a system. I didn't even really understand or knew about boundaries when I was a kid. That wasn't a concept that I was introduced to. But after DBT and learning a little bit about the importance of it, I have kind of a big way to funnel down to making decisions and choices for boundaries. And that's by starting by evaluating kind of what I want in life and what are my values, and then breaking that down into decisions with how I'm going to spend my time and energy, and really listening to my body and my heart and what really makes me happy and feel good, and not try to get too caught up in focusing on what I think other people want and need. That's important, but it can also be very draining. And that's exactly why and where the boundaries come in, saying no, and choosing what I do with my energy. I'm still figuring it out, though.
It's so, I think, satisfying to say no when you're trying to set a boundary, but it can feel, I don't know, it can feel complicated and sometimes hard, or maybe you could, it's so easy to feel bad about saying no, I think, when you're trying to set a boundary and kind of protect yourself in your time.
I have a really hard time with that. I don't like upsetting people, and I definitely have a compulsion to try to please people out of a deep-seated fear of upsetting people. And I'm working on that because that's definitely really healthy, but it's I compulsively even volunteer myself to do things that I probably don't have the actual bandwidth to do. I do enjoy making people happy, and at the same time I need to learn how to make myself happy without that element. So it can feel uncomfortable.
How have you, I guess, what's today? February 5th, I want to say?
Yes.
Maybe? What is time anymore? We were just celebrating Groundhog Day, which is essentially every day this year. So yeah, I guess because it's up front and in our face all the time, what has your experience in this pandemic and sheltering in place kind of looked like in terms of setting boundaries with, you know, with friends, with family, with your work, and just kind of how you manage your time and take care of yourself? Because I think it feels like there's an added layer, and that now this is a practice that like is universal for all of us, having to like set boundaries for multiple reasons, for mental health reasons, for safety, like just all of it.
Yeah, it's something that I have to focus on practicing, and I think it's part of my self-care, because if I don't set boundaries, there's not enough time to do what I want to do and what I need to do, such as maybe rest more or have more alone time or spend time on things that make me happy, like art and organizing and whatever. And I've had to definitely have to say no to things at work. You know, I'm a manager, and during the pandemic, it kind of felt like the roof was falling in. And every moment of the day, it was just constant asks and, um, emotional things I had to absorb from other people. And
Mm-hmm.
then from the family, um, that I don't have answers for, to even then try to absorb what I'm absorbing. So I had to realize, look, I'm going to burn out if I don't put a pin in it, step away, take a break, do self care. If I don't delegate, and if I don't say no to certain things, like maybe I can't do 3 Zoom calls this week because that time I want to rest. Maybe I can't go out and meet this friend for social distance picnic because I really need just one whole day with no responsibility. Um, and that's also what's been weird this pandemic, is having to set boundaries with things that usually make you feel happy, like going
Mm.
to see a friend. It's like my energy
Yeah,
pools, even going to the grocery store is not, it's just suddenly everything seems so much harder. So,
it's like I think there's just so much unknown about like how long the pandemic will last, the disease itself, and all its different variants, and like when there's no end in sight and so many unknowns, it's just it can feel so scary, like going to the grocery store, like going to see a friend, because even if you feel like you're on the same page as them, even with like close family, like where have you been, like who have you seen, it's just hard to know, like are you exposing yourself, like is this a risk worth taking, and at the same time having to balance your mental health, I think, because if you're a total like shut in and just like not having any human interaction or being outside, that is also really, I think, dangerous, you know?
yeah. And I think an added challenge is that we're not all taking this and handling this the same way, and there's
Mm-hmm.
different levels of what people are comfortable with, and running into problems with people who are more nonchalant, whereas you're more vigilant, and them not understanding why you don't want to come for dinner, or why you're not going to the birthday party, and feeling bad and this sort of guilt for doing what you feel is right and what you're comfortable with. And um, there's a lot of friends who maybe will stop hitting you up, or family members who get frustrated, and it's like really hard to lay that line down. And at the same time, it's very important if you feel what that's right. I've definitely struggled with that and have regretted some choices, and it's like, okay, I have to do what my gut is telling me to do, and if these people really love and respect me, that's going to be okay.
Yeah, it's just hard to have those conversations, I think, with like family and close friends about, you know, maybe, yeah, you can't come home for the holidays, or whatever it may be, because I think, you know, to them it can feel like, oh my God, like you don't love us, or like you're rejecting us. But ultimately, like we're trying to look out for each other and keep everyone healthy, and especially like parents and grandparents and like close family members who
Yeah.
are older, like not wanting to get them sick. And I think there's the feeling of guilt either way, whether you like go see them or not. It's like we're all doing the best we can, but
Yeah.
I think having those hard conversations is a key like step in setting that boundary. And not everyone's going to react great to it.
Yeah, and even you're getting these invites and there's supposed to be these fun things. I sometimes get anxiety about responding. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time goes by and it's like, instead of facing and setting that boundary, it's like you just wiggle around it and avoid it. But it's like trying to find that confidence to not ghost and to be upfront and transparent with what you need, and to own that, because I think that's an important lesson to learn, of validating your own experience needs with other people, and saying, look, I hear you, I think that sounds great, and I just don't have the ability to do this weekend. And you know what, you can say no without explaining, which is like a crazy weird concept that I'm trying to embrace and practice more. It's actually really powerful.
You can say no to things, and I think like, yeah, going back to the pandemic element of it, like being transparent and upfront with communication can be so hard for a lot of us, because a lot of the time, yeah, it's easier to like ghost someone or just like sort of Irish goodbye, maybe virtually, or whatever that looks like. But like, having those conversations, like if you genuinely like want to meet up with someone, like what feels comfy for you both, like is everyone like, did someone just go to like a rave? Like probably not, but you never know. And I don't know, it's just tough, but I think going with your gut as much as you can, and trying to hold that space for yourself is really important, in a larger like kind of scale of where we are right now with just this. I don't know, the pandemic feels so much harder this year. I mean, I know we're only like 2 months into the year, but it just feels harder than it was before.
Is. It totally is. And I don't know, something I struggle with is like even knowing like what boundaries to set. Like first, the how is uncomfortable and difficult, but like even what, and I think that starts with trying to listen and become aware of what I want and need. And that means sitting with myself and not running to people please and not running to do what I think other people want me to do, but to be like, okay, do I have the energy to do this? Do I want to do this? What do I want out of this quarantine? Do I want to chill? Do I want to be more productive? Do I want to start eating healthy? And what are the choices with my time that are going to put me towards that? If you want to just chill, then just chill.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's so easy to feel the pressure to like be super productive, or like, I don't know, or to like chill, or to chill 100%. And like,
which I struggle with both. It's like,
but it's so, so I think just like feeling it out day by day, if that's too much, hour by hour, and realizing like, hey, maybe like on this work day or weekend, like I'm not going to get a lot done, and like that's okay. Or maybe today is the day that like I knock out a bunch of things on my list. Like, I don't know, like you can have days that really vary in terms of how productive you are, and the fact that we're all still working remote. Well, not all of us, those of us that are lucky to work remotely during the pandemic, we're still doing our jobs and expected to kind of like do them, and it can be a lot.
Yeah, and do them within the same, however many 100 square foot area you have, with no other stimulation that usually kept you going, and the off time from work. So it can be difficult, and kind of starting to feel like a hamster in a wheel, just kind of spinning and trying to hold on, and continue to feel it out very much day by day, and sometimes hour by hour, as you mentioned. And that's, I think, good sometimes, and it can help us to slow down, take a choice, think about it, evaluate. You don't have to react immediately. You can take the time you need to respond. I think something that kind of stresses me out sometimes is like, we always have our phones, we're always on the computer.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's okay to take your time to respond on any platform or message when you are ready to. You don't have to be there's respecting people's time, don't ghost, but like
Completely.
blowing up all the time, you can take a
You
nap
can
with
take a
silence.
beat. Yeah, you can take a beat. I think, I mean, this is pre-pandemic, but I think I learned a lot about boundary setting, in, I don't know, January of 2019, right after my boyfriend Phil died, who I spoke about in our last episode on grief and loss, because that was a situation where there were so many people around and sort of maybe expectations I had in my head, or just the way that we think about like a timeline for grief and what needs to be done. Like, I'm going to go back to work at this time, or I'm going to like do this at this time. I'm going to reach out to people, what, blah, blah, blah. Like there's all these expectations, but I think from the beginning, I was really intentional with like who I included in my kind of close circle of people. And it was really immediate family and like close family friends. Super intentional with my time. As I mentioned before, the day after Phil died, it was like, do I go see his family right now? Or am I with my family? And maybe it's like time to get a hamburger and a martini. And like, that was a great choice in that moment.
Yeah.
And just, his family and those hard conversations are going to be there the next day. But I think saying what I needed and what I didn't need and what I didn't want, oftentimes in those early days and early weeks, that was a form of boundary setting where it felt like a part of me that I hadn't really like accessed before. It felt like a part of me that was like taking over, like really powerful on like saying the things I needed to say of what I needed or wanted or not, and like being like, no, and like not trying to be an asshole or be mean, but like, I don't need this. It was, I don't know, it was kind of empowering in a way, being able to say no.
That sounds like an incredibly powerful experience, and I think a remarkable example of growth, and how resilience can change how we experience the rest of our lives, because that's a skill. Even if it just developed out of this tragic event, you had that in you, and now you can do that on a regular basis and realize the power you have. And the whole get a burger and martini thing, I mean, that's just the best type of listening, self-care. Instead of, you said, hey, wait a second, okay, this is what these people might need from me, and what is my timeline and what do I need, and putting that in a spot that worked for you. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was. Well, and it felt like, I mean, it was a decision that had to be made quickly. We could have turned around, but my dad was driving this rental car, and we had just picked up my mom and sister from the airport, and we were driving back to Oakland and Berkeley, and he's like, okay, are we going to take this exit to like see Phil's family, or do you want to go get like a martini? And it was like, you have to make a choice when you're driving. So I was like,
oh wow,
I think we're getting dinner. Just
that's amazing.
And then he's like, all right. And so I like made the call to his family. They totally understood. They got it. And yeah. And then we just did it, and it was the right decision. And also because, as an aside, like when a situation where like a loved one dies, suddenly you're in a state of shock and like you forget to eat. So we really hadn't eaten that day. Yeah. So anyways, choices, but it was, I don't know, it just felt like so much was beyond my control, and there was so much uncertainty that being able to like make those decisions of how I wanted to spend my time and with whom, that was something I could have a say in. And it was really kind of empowering and nice to have some sense of control, at least about like, I don't know. Yeah. Who was in my bubble pre-pandemic.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of an interesting experience, because when I typically think of boundaries, I think of having to lay down, a line with somebody's behavior that's negative or making me feel uncomfortable, or something I can't do, maybe a little bit more neutral. But in this case, it's like, it must be tough having to set boundaries with just a bunch of people trying to help, because there's no way you need all of this. And there's always people reaching out, and you're trying to make sure everyone feels appreciated and this and that, and having to say no thank you a bunch. It's a different type of setting boundary that I'm sure could create guilt of like, wow, all these people are trying to help and I didn't text her back yet. And, right? Like,
yeah. Oh yeah. Like boundary setting, I think, especially, after I kind of told friends and like coworkers and family and, like 5 days later, what had happened, a bunch of people reached out and I was reminded by like my dad and my mom that like I didn't need to like reach out immediately, even if I felt the need to. So, which was really hard because I'm definitely someone that like likes to get back to people and be like, hey, like I'm responding to your thing. And even with people who sent like flowers or like cards or like books that might be helpful to my own kind of grief journey down the line, I sent thank you cards not to anyone, to everyone. And
wow.
I don't know, but like, which is not something that is expected or that anyone needs to do. But like, I don't know. I just was like, well, it's like something to do. I don't know. It felt like the right thing for me at the time, but I think that I certainly had to practice with the like text and emails and stuff, just like taking a second and like letting it just sit there and knowing it's there and appreciating it, but not feeling like, okay, I have to respond immediately, which was very like counter to how I would normally kind of deal with things.
Yeah.
It's tricky, but I think it's totally valid, especially with a situation like that. Like, yeah, there's no expectation to have anyone respond to anything.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, personal work and certainly family, there can be this sort of like obligation of religion, like relationships and things you feel like you're expected to do. And maybe this like person, whoever they are to you in your life, doesn't feel like they're bringing value and joy. It's like, why am I doing these habits and these behaviors that's draining me when really this person's not reciprocating? So I think that's another example where boundaries can come in like kind of that negative way of just like, okay, is this even really making me that happy? I don't know how I pivoted that hard over to that, but
no, I think especially if someone has been in your life for like a long time, whether it's family or like, I don't know, like a friend that like on paper, like you've been friends since, like you were kids. And sometimes I think, and that can be really hard because it's like they're in your life, but sometimes they stay in your life because it's convenient. And, but maybe like, I don't know, you grow apart and like, that's okay too. Maybe this is a topic for a different episode.
Yeah. So I have an interesting question that I kind of just thought of. Because I think for me it differs. Like, do you think it's more difficult to set boundaries with your personal relationships with people you know and work with, or boundaries with strangers? Weird interactions with people touching you or something cutting you in line. Like, which do you think is more comfortable, or is it like the same for you?
I think it's harder to set. Well, I don't know. Like, I mean, I guess I haven't really had because of what we're doing right now, which is like staying inside a lot. Haven't had moments, although maybe at the grocery store where there's strangers who are like getting too close to you.
Yeah. Touching you too close, cutting you in line, being rude to someone else in front, like weird situations where you kind of have to be like, ugh.
Yeah, that, I mean, I think they're both challenging in different ways, because if it's like someone that you're close with, who you haven't had a conversation with about boundaries, like that can be difficult to bring that up and sort of deliver what you need to say, or however you want to express that to them in a way that is authentic but doesn't maybe feel hurtful, which is a hard balance to strike. But with people who, I guess in the example of like the grocery store being in the pandemic, I don't know, it's really hard to inch away from people. And I think if you say like, hey, like you're getting too close to me, people might freak out.
Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, so I think it's more difficult for me to set boundaries with people that I love and care about or are in my life, and I want to please, whether it's work or personal or whatever. But I think with them, I try really hard to respond and to take the time to respond, and the anxiety of what could come out, and I don't want to seem too intense, blah, blah, blah. But with strangers, I think the problem for me is I don't have time to respond. I react very emotionally, and it's kind of like this adrenaline rush, and maybe I'm not always effective. And that happens in personal situations too. I could be a little bit emotionally reactive before I like sit down and think. And I think that's the challenge for me with boundaries is I have to pause a little bit to think about the choice and the outcome and what is going to benefit me the best and be effective. So, with strangers, I feel like I have maybe slightly more confidence to quickly say something, but it's usually not the thing to say.
Yeah,
or the way to say it.
Because it's like in the moment and you just, I mean, yeah, and it's more often than not, if it's with a stranger, it's in public. So you have
and
to
I'm just like,
yeah, you're just having this like immediate reaction to something that they do. I think before the pandemic, in terms of thinking about boundary setting with strangers, I would say, I would probably go to like situations where I'm like walking on the street or on BART or on the bus, and there's a situation with someone that like makes me feel uncomfortable.
I was just about to say that.
And like, I will often like freeze up or get very emotional, and it doesn't end up being a great time. Like it's just, yeah, it's so tricky. And I feel like, I don't know, like you just have to feel it out, especially as a woman in a city. I don't know. It sucks.
Yeah. I'm sitting here talking about confidence and this and that and planning, responding. And it's like, okay, you put me in a situation with a guy making me feel uncomfortable, touching my shoulders, anything, saying something, I freeze.
Yeah.
I freeze. And eventually I can tell someone like my boyfriend or friends that I'm with or bandmates, and I'm like, look, this guy, but in the moment to the person, I'm just like, you're touching my shoulder. Like I've been sexually assaulted by like a doctor. And like in that moment of just like, how do you set boundaries? And it's like, you always feel bad about not standing up for yourself. And you tell someone, and sometimes the first thing they say is, you should have.
Yeah. The like, oh, you should have like done this differently. I had a situation in my early 20s where I went to a show at the House of Blues in San Diego and was like didn't know what was happening, but was like sexually assaulted by someone, like a guy, a very older man at the show, and then like told a security guard about it, and he like,
in the crowd.
Yeah, and the security guard like didn't believe me. And then I don't know. And one of my friends who was like pre-law or like in law school at the time was like, we need to go to the police. And I was just like, there are so many things that you should, like, so many ideas of like what you should or shouldn't do. We didn't, because I thought it was going to be more of a production than it needed to be. But like looking back, yeah, I would have gone to the police and like reported it, because the fact that I was, I don't know, being sort of gaslighted by the security guard who was like, ew, like, why would you say that? Like, did you just make that up? I'm like, no, this actually just happened to me.
It creates an unsafe place, for females, and it makes us avoid certain venues, certain shows, certain band people, and it sucks, and it's so broken. And I appreciate you saying that. I kind of felt weird about mentioning the thing with the doctor, because it's like, and I wrote them up to the board, but he had like a private practice, and it's like, nothing is really going to come of that maybe, but like creating a paper trail and saying something is important, because if they've done it to you, they've done it before, and they'll do it again.
Oh yeah, they'll do it to some other person. Yeah, I mean, 2 months before we went into shelter in place, I was walking around my like office when we used to go into like buildings
What's
to
that?
work. Yeah, it's like, huh, what?
What's
Not
that?
just right by your bed. And was like walking around downtown Oakland, and some guy came up to me and was, I don't know, he got like very close to me, and it was during the day. There were people around, and he seemed like he was maybe gonna like take my phone. I wasn't really sure, but I just had a bad feeling in my gut. So I was like, no, like, sorry, I'm just gonna like, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And then he got really close and like almost kind of lunged me. So I just like started running, and he called me, what did he call? Oh, he's like, you're a crazy bitch. Like you're running into traffic. And I was like, honestly, at this point, like, would rather be like hit by a car, like slowly, than be like assaulted by you, or like, I don't know, have you mug me. So
Even touched.
yeah, and I ran and ran and ran back to my office, called my little sister, and was like bawling. And this was 2 days before the like 1 year anniversary of Phil being gone. So it was already like a shaky week. And then I told the security guard in our building about it, and I don't know, he's like, yeah, it's probably not good for you to just be walking around listening to like a podcast. I'm like, dude, it's the middle of the day. I remember I actually like ran up when I was running away from this guy. I ran up to this white guy with AirPods in who was running, and I was like, hey, can you help me? Like, there's this guy, I think he's chasing me. And he just looked at me, took out an AirPod, and shrugged, which was the worst part of it all. But like, I couldn't even, yeah, I know.
Okay, so before you said that, I was thinking about the security guard example and how, like, not to generalize here, but like I think a lot of men who don't know what it's like to live in fear of being physically assaulted or sexually assaulted don't understand how scary these interactions are and how often, and to be dismissed time and time and time and time again. It's like, this is why we don't say things. And
Totally.
It's like, that's not validating, and that's not helpful. And like, fuck that guy with the AirPods, dude.
He was so unhelpful. He was so unhelpful. And I came back to the office, and I had been like crying, blah, blah, blah. And then my coworkers were like very nice, but it definitely put a damper in the week. Let's just say that. Like,
can I just live? Can I just live? Can I listen to a podcast during the day? Like, yo, man.
I know. I mean, yeah. And then, 2 months later, here we are starting this global pandemic, but it really sucked. And it left me kind of like shaken and just, I don't know. It's like, I would have understood if, like, not understood, but it would have made sense if I was walking in like an empty alleyway in the middle of the night, just like, but there were people around. There were women walking. There were people with their babies. There were lots of people around. And the one person I try to confide in just kind of shrugs at me and like dismisses me. So that was frustrating. And like, wow, guy with the AirPods, not helpful at all.
Yeah. And I think this is a great example of how boundaries can be very important for our safety, mental health, physical health, and immediate danger.
Totally.
Saying no to getting in a car with someone or going to a second location with someone you're uncomfortable with. Saying no to taking drugs or a drink you think is spiked. Saying no, and also one of the biggest, hardest boundaries I've ever had to do in my life, which is like the no contact. To cut someone out of your life because they're abusive, they're toxic, and engaging in any further conversation is not effective. So it's like the biggest boundary wall of just like, no. And I think with these strangers and these interactions, I have a hard time being like, is this like a big no, where it's like not even worth my energy, because I get so emotional that I like yell back, fuck you, don't you, It's like, sometimes I like fright and panic, and other times I just snap. It's like the effective meter can't find the middle for those types of immediate situations sometimes.
I feel the same way with strangers. If it's like they've gone too far, it's either like you freeze up or you do the extreme opposite and like you start running into traffic.
Yeah.
Because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, flipping people off, getting mouthy, ineffective, as we say in DBT.
Yeah, it's interesting that our boundary setting has ended up here, but it's so, I mean, I know we've been sheltering in place for almost a year, but like still there's still going to be situations with strangers, particularly men, where, you're made to feel uncomfortable and stuck.
Yeah, and even
And
people just being shitty, passive
totally.
aggressive comments, you know, just little digs and stuff, and like choosing, and kind of a more of a, you know, existential sense of a boundary of just like choosing not to let your mind engage with that judgmental thought or that comment, and just, allowing the energy to go back towards something else that's worth thinking about or feeling about. Though it can be tough. We always hear that one negative thing. But it's like, what?
Yeah.
I'm gonna draw a boundary with myself and say I'm not gonna self wallow for this long. I gotta stop after an hour, go watch some Netflix, and feel good and do self care.
And I think, and we can get into this maybe separately in another episode. We just have so many ideas, but I think
So many files.
we have so many files in our cabinet. See you in the cabinets. Anyways, oh, look at you. For those who aren't tuning in via YouTube, Alex just pretended she was looking through a filing cabinet with her monocle, I believe. Whoops.
Yes, I just have my monocle.
That's what you were acting out.
Yep, thank you. I really appreciate that.
I was going to say that boundary setting with the idea of like trolls in mind, whether it's for work or just, I don't know, you're having your own personal interaction with like online trolls. I think that is a very, very, very hard boundary to set in itself. And we can get into that later on, but just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
Yeah. And, we like making people happy. We like being nice. We like doing what other people want us to do sometimes. Maybe that's your kind of style, You're all about the love and kindness. And at the same time, you don't have to do everything that everybody wants and expects of you all the time. That's what I think is important about boundaries, is realizing that you don't have to fill the needs of everything around you, and that the first priority has to be fill your own cup, because then you can pour selectively into these other fountains.
I 100% agree. It's like you can say no without being an asshole.
Yeah. And again, the people who really are worth your time and energy and love and respect you are going to be around after you set those boundaries. And, it can be tough to feel that out. Sometimes we don't effectively set them. We get really mad. We get really sad. Or sometimes we don't say them at all.
Mm-hmm.
But we can continue to practice and do it softly and effectively in a way that doesn't hurt other people around us,
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that you set a boundary and you set it in a way that is not hurtful, but is real and true to yourself with the people. Sometimes, yeah, the ones who are close to you, who you love. And if they're your people, like they'll understand. And, at first, if it's your first time setting a boundary with them, like it might be hard to hear it, but I think in the long run, like those are your true blue people.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the true blues might not like it at first and might have a reaction. And maybe it's not so much about the boundary, but how you set it. Were you defensive? Were you accusatory? And kind of reevaluate that process for you. And again, if you're stuck with just like, what do I even need to do? I'm unhappy. I don't know where to set my boundaries. I would say take a huge step back and look at the things that you want to do with your life, and decide if your choices are putting you closer to that, farther away from that, or like not even doing anything. Because there's a lot of room to kind of guide back to the values that are most important to you. Is it family? No? Is it friends? Passion projects? Work? What does that look like for you?
Do you have a memory of maybe the first time that you set a boundary, or a time where you felt like this was such an important, like maybe in the moment it was probably hard in the moment, but
yeah.
like you're so glad that you did that.
Yeah. So I think the biggest boundary journey that I've been on is the relationship with my mother. In high school, there was a period of time due to her addiction that I decided it was not healthy and safe for me to talk to her at all. And that was a process of like probably like a year. I no longer lived with her, and I needed this space, to start. I just needed space to start to figure out what I was going to do with my life to be safe and happy, and that was really difficult. And she was very unhappy about that. And the thing with people like that is that they can hit you with every type of emotion, anger, sadness, guilt, lying, anything that's going to make you feel differently and change your boundary. So I practiced learning to hold that. And yeah, like growing up, I just didn't know about boundaries. So, self-care wasn't talked about, fulfilling my needs. It was just like, smile, make sure they don't get upset with you, don't get in the way.
It's so much pressure. And I don't think we even had, a word for self-care, like self-preservation.
No, I heard about that like in my late 20s.
Yeah.
It's like, what? And then the idea to make like a self-care plan, or also to like just map out boundaries of saying no and like that it's okay. It's like, wait, what?
Right? I know.
It's incredibly empowering.
It's super empowering. I can't think of the earliest time, but I think in my early 20s, I had a falling out with like a friend who had been one of my close friends since we were in, I want to say the fourth grade.
Wow.
And I don't know it, but I think it was the boundary setting was really the sort of catalyst for the falling out on my end, because it was like, yes, we've been friends for this long on paper, and I don't know how much we have in common anymore. And I don't know how helpful we are in each other's lives. And I just think that like being together isn't, as friends, is not like healthy anymore. So it was hard, but I think in the long run, it was the right thing to do. And just saying like, I think it's time to kind of go our separate ways. And I don't know that, this relationship's really serving me anymore. And that's like a boundary that was set to kind of take care of myself. And, it definitely wasn't easy, but I think it was like, I'm so glad I made that choice.
So did that come out of like, because I feel like sometimes people just drift away and it's like, no, neither party makes the effort, or maybe one party makes the effort, but like, do you feel like you had to set that boundary because there was some sort of level of dependency that you weren't able to reciprocate, or like didn't want to reciprocate?
Yeah, it wasn't like a clean like fade out or ghost each other. It was like I just couldn't
clean fade out.
Yeah. And Ken Burns effect.
And scene.
Yeah, it was just like, I don't think I can be that person to you. Like there were behaviors and emotions that like I wasn't used to dealing with and didn't feel okay to me to have to deal with, as or like it was one thing to like, I felt like I was a good supportive friend, and this just felt like a different level of having to be someone else that was depending on me. Like it was too much pressure. It felt really just a lot, and I was already going through kind of my own things in life, having just like finished college and moved home. So I don't know, it was so hard because in college it's hard to make friends. After you graduate, it's even harder because you're not in that bubble anymore. And so I think you grasp onto those people who have been in your lives for so long. Like on paper, like historically, like we were close, but sometimes those people just don't serve you anymore, and it's hard, but it's
weird.
Okay. It is weird. It's weird. And I think it happens in life all the time. Like, someday.
I think it's a natural part of life and healthy, because I think it can be a sign that you yourself are growing and evolving. Yeah. We don't all do that in the same direction. And it is weird. And I had this weird guilt of kind of removing myself from a relationship that was no longer serving. And it's like, wow, but we used to be so close.
Yeah.
And that it's like, and
it's
that's
so
okay.
Weird.
It is weird. like going to the same city 10 years later and you're looking at the same buildings and yet everything's different.
Completely. Or like the you that you used to be is you're not that person anymore. Maybe like the person that you were really good friends with changed. Like, I don't know. There was
And
another.
that can be good.
Yeah.
That is good.
I think another like thing is just thinking about, yeah, people that you were like very good friends with when you were younger, whether it's like college, high school, elementary school, whatever, like thinking like some of them like luckily are still in our lives, but some may have faded out, whether it's because of something that happened or because of just the clean fade out. And maybe there's a moment where you can like reconnect with them later on, or maybe not. And maybe you follow each other on Instagram, but maybe you have to unfollow because they are Trump supporters. So bless that. And you know what, everyone's on their own journey, but it's just it can be a lot. And I think it's really healthy to boundary set with friendships too.
Yeah. And it's like friendships can be like water faucets, right? They can be on all the way. You're in it, you're besties, you're this, you're that. And then others, start to slowly close it. And there's some, liking of photos, an occasional check-in. And, they're dripping at different paces. Some are done or have been droughted and removed from the sink. And that's good too. It's always changing. And that's the thing about life.
That's a great metaphor. I feel like, and there's some people who like, you are great friends and you talk like once every 6 months, but then you pick up where you started and like nothing has changed. And yeah, it's so like that, the water metaphor.
It's like I can love you and be happy for you and support you and at the same time not be like texting you all the time.
Totally.
I can just watch your little things, your renovation story, be like, yeah, man. Yeah, but it's like I got my tank. I'm looking at the gas levels and I'm picking and choosing which friends, which family, and which just me stuff I'm doing.
Totally. I mean, the amount of time in a day with all these different things, it's
never enough.
No wonder that we have to like say no to things and just like, what do we need and what can we do?
So we can say yes to ourselves. And maybe the battle is boundaries with ourselves, and it's not necessarily other people. Maybe we're putting pressures on ourselves to be more active, to work out, and it's like, hey, wait, I'm tired, or I need to lay here. It's like allowing ourselves the permission and giving boundaries of like, look, we're gonna create more buffer time than normal, more chill out, do nothing time. That's a boundary, with yourself.
That is. I hadn't even thought about that, but you're totally right. I feel like now, given that it's funny that we're talking about boundaries, and I know that you have worked remotely in your role for your job pre-pandemic for 7 years. Wow, visually 7 years. But I think for a lot of people, it's like almost impossible to establish those physical or different parts of your life boundaries when your desk is right next to the place that you sleep, is right next to
your phone always going off, the work email.
Yeah, it's so hard to do that when we're living our lives and our work and everything from like under the same roof, if we're lucky enough to do that. But it's difficult.
So what's a great boundary? I've been practicing this for years. I literally don't know the last time, unless I'm waiting for like the pizza delivery to call. Put your phone on silent. If you're taking a nap, you do not, unless it's an emergency call you're waiting for, put your phone on silent. If you're off the clock, put your phone on silent and set the boundary of when you're going to look, when you're ready for the updates, when you're ready to participate and communicate back. That's an amazing tool.
That's amazing. They probably have this on other ones, but if you have an iPhone, like put on do not disturb when you're going to bed, because you need sleep.
Yeah. Limit the screen time too. Like set a boundary of like how much time you're going to be spending looking at doom scroll posts or Instagram accounts that make you feel bad. Look at stuff that makes you happy. If you're going to be on your phone that's part of your self-care to chill out. Look at things that, make you feel good. Get your information and then draw a line in the depressing shit and say, all right, there's my boundary. Now let's go look at Pinterest or play a game and have fun for a moment.
Right? Or like, I don't know, like go around the block or not for like a walk.
Just sit outside. Open your window. If that's all you can do, just
sit outside, open your window, do a puzzle, put on a podcast, sweep the house. Sweep the house. That's actually one of my favorite quarantine activities is
taking a nap. Always a great reset.
Yeah. Reset, cooking.
Go through a drawer.
Yeah, go through a drawer, clean out your closet. Like there are so many things you can do.
Read.
Collage.
Workout.
Yeah. We've got a number of activities.
Hang out with Grogu.
Oh, I always forget his name.
Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda.
Do you have any sort of parting thoughts on boundary setting or, the art, I would say the art of kind of saying no for folks?
I wish I did. I wish there was like this list of like boundaries, ABC, steps 1, 2, 3. But really, I think my advice is that there is no concrete way to build it. It's all about listening to yourself and evolving and progressing with it and feeling it out and feeling what you need in the moment as it changes and evaluating your decisions and behavior and effort and align them with what you really want out of life or out of this day and out of this quarantine. What about you?
I 100% agree. And yes, and I think, I think the first step before you actually decide kind of what, if any, boundary needs to be set with yourself or with others or a situation is just like listening to what you need and turning your phone off, just taking a moment to like sit with like, okay, what do I need right now? Like, is this going to be helpful? Is this going to like make me more anxious? And I don't know. And again, like the grief trauma stuff that we talked about last time, just kind of like feeling it out because it can be really easy to like want to like jump to like, okay, what's next, blah blah blah, but like being in the moment and taking it moment by moment, maybe it sounds not super helpful, but I think that's a really great first step. And then just like again, saying no or your version of no and kind of your own self-preservation and setting that boundary is really empowering, and it can be difficult, and that's okay if you feel uncomfortable doing it, but also like the people in your life who get it and who love you and support you, like they'll understand even if they're sad for a little bit, like or maybe they're like they totally get it and you don't even need to explain, but they'll be around, and the other ones like catch them on the flip side, and that's okay. But you got to take care of yourself first, especially now.
Yeah, you're number one. You can't fill other people's cup if your cup is empty and too cold, too hot, molded. Like you got to make sure your cup is feeling good and the way that makes you most fulfilled in life.
And like in the words of Nelly, not Nelly Furtado, but Nelly, I am number one, Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening to episode 3 of the Alex Files. Tune in next time when we talk about, who knows, just you're going to have to stay tuned to see. We love you and appreciate you, our listeners. And practice the art of saying no. It's a good time. On that note, we'll see you in the cabinets.
See you in the cabinets. Tip top.
Thank you.